Hi, everyone. Welcome to GradMissions Office Hours. We've had to drag a rolling chair in from the hallway into our office hours today because Ben Parker from Hey Future Lawyer is here with us. Hi, Ben.
Hey Autumn, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. We're so glad you're here. If you don't follow Hey Future Lawyer on socials, you need to stop this recording right now and go follow because Ben is really shining a lot of light in this arena of what is realistic around prepping for your LSAT. And actually, we were talking right before we hopped on about if someone came to me and said, I have this set budget and I can only spend money on either LSAT prep or application prep. And this is from someone who has an application prep company. I would say spend your money on LSAT prep. Why do they need to do that, Ben?
Well, I'd say the short answer is that if you don't have your LSAT score, it's a non-starter. Obviously, Autumn does great work, and you all should really consider getting application help as someone who has seen a lot of your essays. A lot of you can do better with professional eyes on it. But without the LSAT score, there's nothing Autumn can do to save you. So you need to at least get the score into a competitive range.
That's absolutely right. So I thought it'd be really interesting so on this podcast, only two of us have ever taken, right? Logan, have you taken the LSAT? No. She's like, actually, no.
Yeah.
Hell no. So only two people on this podcast have actually taken the LSAT before. So I'd love to hear you two kind of dissect what that's actually like.
Yeah, I mean,
You're really old and took it a long time ago.
yeah, I imagine we even had fairly different experiences because I was one of the first COVID people when that was a transition they did. So I took it online. It was only three sections. It's still a logic game, so we have that in common, I'm sure. But it was an interesting experience. I found not to be the most intensive, but that probably has more to do with me than with the test, in that I'm pretty naturally inclined for this. But I studied for it for a few months on my own, did a lot of questions and reviewed them. One of the issues in the LSAT prep space is there's a lot of preparation that is not focused on doing questions. It's focused on these magical incantations of formal logic and diagramming and things that just fundamentally don't matter. But when you actually do questions and review them and learn from your mistakes, you get better. And it's actually one of the biggest mistakes I see people do. I will talk to people that have quote unquote studied for months and have done all of 100 questions. And it just blows my mind. It's like, what are you doing? You're not doing the whole test. Like the whole point is just to do questions and learn from them. You can't just read about the questions and then expect to do them.
That's right. It's like being in a really high level math class in college and you're like bumping along in class feeling so confident because the professor's doing everything on the board. And then you sit down on the test and you're like, oh, shoot, I lost my guide. What's happening? Lysine, what was your
Yeah.
experience like?
Um, yes. So I was way before COVID when I took the LSAT, and I remember,
It was cholera, right? That was the main health scare
yeah,
back.
it was scarlet fever.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
I understood. R.I.P. Beth
So
for Little Women.
yeah, I talk about this a lot, but just my experience being first generation college student, first generation attorney, I just was like, okay, I guess I'll do what everybody tells me and just kind of go through the motions. And so, I was really good at studying for my coursework, but when
Mhm.
it came to the LSAT, I had no clue. And so I borrowed a lot of money from my parents who were very supportive, but they didn't know, didn't have the resources that we have today. Borrowed some money, took a big name prep course. I was working in the summer. I went to this prep course from 7 to 10 at night after I worked my internship. And I just kind of like that math class. I stood up there, and there was a really smart girl who had taken the LSAT several times and was at an Ivy League school and kind of told us how to do it. And I did okay, obviously, went to law school, but I wish I would have had, just like what we do here at Grad Missions, I wish I would have had someone like a Ben who sat down and actually told me how to take the test, how to do the strategy, not just listen to someone, but actually sit with you and help you through the strategy, because it's not a test that you study for, it's a test that you use strategy for. So, and then I will never forget, just as a side note, taking it, going into the test, we all have our Ziploc baggie, like we're going to prison. And you have your Ziploc bag with your ID and like two pencils, like medicine if you needed medicine. And we all lined up and we had to sign a like anti-plagiarism. I don't know. Like I'm not going to cheat. And we had
Right.
to write a paragraph in cursive. And the guy in front of me did not know how to write in cursive. So it took him an hour to write and print, and like finally the proctor was like, honey, just put loops, like just loop the letters together. And I don't know if they still make you do that, but I'm like, what was the hardest part about the LSAT? Waiting for an hour for that guy to write his paper. Just a lot of anxiety around it, and just having someone sit down and help you build confidence and that you're not just listening to a lecture about this. We're actually working together for you to know exactly how to handle this test and give you that confidence, I think is huge.
That's right. So you use kind of a big box company. So Ben, obviously there was something about the big box company that you felt like was lacking, or you wouldn't have started your own business. So what's the difference? What makes Hey Future Lawyer different from those big boxes?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of differences between various options because the ones that I'm perceiving that Lysanne did was maybe one of the large national ones where they run courses at universities or in big cities. And the big issue there is quality control, where there are really good teachers, but their hiring standards are often a 165 untimed on a practice test. That's the industry standard for these big companies, which is
Mhm.
often just a smart person who doesn't know anything about the LSAT. I mean, there's a lot of people that my dad's a professor at university. He could probably score 165 untimed, but he would have no business explaining to anyone like as to how he came to his answers. So that's one issue. Further, there's a lot of, I'd say, overcomplication of the test in terms of the nitty gritty. Fundamentally, the else, and a lot of this comes from logic games where there was a lot more that you actually had to like learn strategically. But now the test is truly just a test of reading at a very high level. People often have an aversion to that because no one ever wants to admit they're not a strong reader. And as such, a lot of prep companies cater to that and tell you, no, it's not that you're bad at reading. Instead, it's that you don't know these like magic tricks that you need for the LSAT. And oh, you're not reading the question first. Don't you know you should know what you're looking for? When in reality, if you're reading strongly, the primary issue or like whatever's going on is going to be apparent. So that's the big thing is one, it's a focus on what actually matters, which is reading. That is a little bit of a battle. It's not the best marketing point because telling people they don't know how to read does not go over well, especially in this age of like we all talk about how literacy is going down, but no one wants to admit it might be them because it's not black and white, it's on a scale. It's like either you're like and a lot of people are in the middle. And then secondly, it's a big emphasis on practice, which also is a little bit harder of a sell for a lot of people because who actually wants to sit down and struggle? Part of that, like you are going to experience failure when you do questions, but you have to get through it or else you'll never figure them out. So those are the big things. And then I guess the real value prop is that there's just a ton of access. Like the whole online platform is great. There's a million versions of me in code that can always pop up on your screen when you're doing questions. So if you have trouble, you like hit the explanation and there I am as if I'm like right there. And so yeah, it's basically just that feedback that you get of like why questions are wrong and how to better do them, as opposed to big picture strategy that is difficult to truly implement. 'Cause it's like, okay, cool, that's how I do a question, but then this one's really hard and you haven't really struggled with it. So
That I've heard, the reason we even got connected is because I kept having clients say they were using you and then they're experiencing these big jumps. And I was like, okay, who is this kid? What's going on? So that's why I reached out to you. So the proof is there. You have the results, you have the testimonials, the skins on the wall, and it's impressive. And one thing that I hear from them is that you're delivering this information in so many mediums that there's going to be a way for them to take it in that works for them, that works with their schedule. And then they also love the option to book a private lesson with you.
yeah, I'm actually a little bit of I tend to actually downplay tutoring partly because with our subscription models, you get access to so much stuff off the bat that like it truly is a last resort. And I actually kind of have a bit of an aversion towards LSAT tutors. Not that there's anything wrong with them, but just I think they're great if you need someone to like smack you and text you every day, like, hey, are you studying or you're not going to do it.
Right.
I dislike working with those clients because I find them to be very difficult to get to improve in the first place. Because if you're not going to do it, if you don't actually want to be a lawyer, I can't make you want to be a lawyer. And
Mm.
if you
Say that. Yes.
like if you performatively want to be a lawyer and say like, oh, I want to be a lawyer, but then you don't do the requisite steps, it's like, then do you really want to? Do you have the emotional maturity? Because at least in my estimation, I find the LSAT to be while difficult and a decent amount of commitment. It's an hour or two for like 3 to 6 months, which is a lot for a lot of people, especially younger folks. But compared to law school and the like academic requirements of going to all your classes and then taking finals, especially when those finals like often determine your career trajectory. I don't know, it's like the LSAT is low pressure compared to finals.
Mm.
So for all the anxiety that we talked about, it's like you can retake it. You can take it whenever you want. If you're not ready, reschedule it. Whereas with your 1L grades, if you do have like certain career aspirations, if you mess up that week, it's just game over with your career. So I think people often perceive the LSAT to be not that it's not high stakes because it is, but you can take it on your own timeline. And that's the other thing that people like, well, and I'm sure you see this working with clients where they will force themselves into a certain timeline and force themselves to take it way before they're ever ready. And it's not that it's not in them, but they've put themselves on this arbitrary, I have to take it in August or my life is over. And
Mhm.
they could either take a gap year, I mean, we could say they could take a later one and apply later in the cycle. I tend to be pretty averse to that, as I'm sure you are as well. But yeah, anyways, like tutoring is there. I have tutors on staff, but generally I tell people to exhaust their own resources and see what they can do prior to going down that route.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked a little bit right before we started this recording about the fact that there's a lot of really bad information out there. You know, people are like, well, there's a law school for everyone. And if you can get a 145 on the LSAT, then you can go to law school. And that is true. You can go to law school. Why is that a bad idea?
Yeah, I just say, and it's unfortunate that it has to be said because it should just be a truth, but I think a lot of it comes to the other side of your all's business, which is the doctors are a pretty safe bet. I guess I don't know, and I might be wrong about doctor salaries, but my perception is that if you go to medical school and graduate, there's a good career for you. And in law school, that is not the same way. If you go to a lot of law schools, salaries are very weak. There's the bimodal distribution curve for first year lawyers of a lot of them make 245-ish, I believe, is what they're paying currently. And then most of them make somewhere between 50 to 80K. And it gets better. Like, because it's not like you're gonna make 50K for the rest of your life, but it'll be a bit of a grind if you're a public defender, if you go to like a lower tier school and don't graduate with really good grades. So I just find that there's a lot of misconceptions about salaries, and I'll talk to people telling me they want to make $400,000 year one. I'm like, literally no lawyers make 400,000. Like, there's not a single one. Like not even the people that I don't know, it just blows my mind. And
You're just watching Suits, and that's not real life.
yeah, so that's where it comes from. It's just the disconnect. There's actually a great book on it, which I'm not sure if you all are familiar with, but it's Don't Go to Law School Unless. It was written after the 2008 crisis when you all were kind of in the
When my
doldrums.
husband started law school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think it was a few years later, but it's much worse than I think it is currently. But I think it paints the picture of like this is not what many of you perceive it to be. Because law can be a great path, but I find a lot of people just default into it because they're a poli sci or history grad with no idea what to do. And I find that to generally be not a good reason to go to law school.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And And you're right that there's trajectory. You know, I think some of the right reasons to go to law school are you do want to do that big law job, right? You want to grind, you want to work 90, 100 hours a week and kind of get your way to partner that and that's definitely a track. We see that a lot, especially like on the coasts. You know, when the 2008 crisis happened, a lot of it was because big law was way over hiring and they couldn't keep that. It wasn't sustainable. And so one thing we really experienced here in kind of the heartland, like, you know, right here in the flyover states and Texas, which is not a flyover state, BT dubs, is that, you know, our firms typically are a little more conservative when it comes to their hires. And so we didn't experience that massive cliff like the coasts did in 2008, 2009. But we also don't have the salaries, right, that those places have. And so I think it's really important just to keep that in mind and when we look at something you were saying about the LSAT is that it is a test of your reading comprehension. Law school will also be a test of your reading skills, as will the bar, as will your job as a lawyer. Like if
Yeah.
you are not able to parse through dense information quickly and get to the point and be able to write about that from a 360-degree view, law school is likely not for you. It's not. When it is for you, right, is when you have a career in mind and you realize that that JD can really accelerate you to the top of the career ladder. I have clients who are NFL sports agents, clients who are in business and they're not in, you know, JD required or bar passage required jobs, but that JD did give them the leg up that they needed it to do. And so I think using it as the tool that it's meant to be and not as like your fast pass to making 400K.
Say that too. With okay, we'll just take the LSAT, get a 145, go to any school that you can. Yes, I think it's okay to view the LSAT as kind of a means to an end. It's a way to get into law school. But like Autumn was saying, if you're struggling with something like the LSAT, it's only going to get more difficult from here. So if you're struggling with reading comprehension, we always have students who are like, well, I don't do well on standardized tests. Okay, I understand that. However, your only law school grade is a 4-hour test for every class. You don't have quizzes, you don't have anything to gauge your metric on how you're doing. And then yes, what's waiting for you after, dozens of 4-hour law school exams is the bar exam, which is it's a big test. And so I don't think viewing the LSAT as, oh, well, I'm just gonna, see what I can do. And then like you really need to think through why you're taking it, why you want to go to law school, and then also the debt that you're going to incur, like we've all been saying, is you're not going to pay it off in 1 year, if you, so think about that too. Just viewing the LSAT as, okay, do I really actually want to pursue a law degree? But two, I want to do well so that I'm not strapped to this debt so that I can be free to. There are some of us who went to law school to be in public interest. We never wanted to be in big law. Nothing against it, just wasn't, for me in terms of my goals for being an attorney. So just you aren't going to make a lot of money, yeah, at least to start. And so just thinking through kind of the big picture of what it looks like to be a JD. Not only 3 years of money, but 3 years of your time and stress and all of those things. And so um, I wouldn't just look at the LSAT as, okay, I'm going to check that box. Yes, it's important to check that box. It's important to do well on it, but that's a small piece of a really big picture.
Right. Ben, talking about scholarships and debt, how do you see LSAT scores correlating to scholarship dollars?
Yeah, I mean, LSAT scores are dollars. I estimate that 1 point is worth around $10,000 to $15,000 in scholarship, let alone career earnings, which, to be fair, is not always a consideration because if you are trying to do public interest, the prestige of going to a quote unquote higher ranked school may be not worth it. But law schools, and I'll give the very quick synopsis on this, at least from how I see it, there's a war in law schools for the rankings. So because US News, ranks all the schools and applicants very much so care. And that,
As do donors and alumni.
yeah,
Yeah.
determines largely how much revenue these schools get because like they're so highly ranked and have such prestige, there's so many applicants where I'm sure they pay $100,000 a year to attend Harvard. But if you go to, I don't know, like New England up the street, no one's going to pay $100,000 a year. So by increasing their ranking, they're able to directly affect their revenue. And as such, they care about it. And the only way for them to explicitly affect their ranking is through their incoming class metrics, which is just LSAT and GPA. There are a lot of other factors that quote unquote matter, but they're things like reputation or bar passage, and those things you can't directly control, you can only like move towards. So the way I see it is that law schools only have one lever to really influence their ranking, which is a very big deal for their donors and for the applicant pool. Because as much as I think like the T50 is a totally arbitrary, stupid distinction, I hear it from kids every day talking about I
Yep.
have to go to top 50 law school. I'm like 55 can be better than 43 depending on the
Yes.
mechanism. There's all these
Yeah.
exceptions.
And
But
they fluctuate. The 3 years you're in law school, they're going to go up and down like crypto, you know?
yeah, like
Yeah.
UC Law SF, I don't want to date you all, but they were probably like a prestigious law school back in the day. And by this I mean like 10, 15 years ago. And nowadays they're like down to like 90 something. And so it's like to pick a school based on ranking is just, I always point to Utah. In the University of Utah, they're ranked 28, which is not, this is not a dunk on Utah, but their hiring is really weak. That they don't, like if you want to work at a local firm in Utah, it's great. But if you are going for the ranking, which so many people are because they view it as a like stand-in for the opportunities out of the school, it's a total misconception because the jobs suck. Well, they don't suck, but they suck for a school ranked 28 out of
Sure.
Utah. So,
Yeah.
anyways, so the rankings are people care about them a lot, is the point, and law schools care about them too. And the only way that they can really move the lever year over year is to import higher LSATs. And so it becomes a game of paying for the higher numbers to incentivize them to come to a lower ranked school. Because if you are, let's say, New England, and there's someone who can go to a better school in Massachusetts, then you have to sweeten the pot and give them a reason to go to New England. So they'll offer like, oh, you can go to, I don't know, a mid-tier, because it's kind of hard to say Harvard or New England. That's quite the like, gap. But let's say there's a mid-tier school in Massachusetts. If someone got in there at full price, or they can go to New England for free, now they might really consider going to New England for free. And depending on their career goals, I would argue that's probably the wise decision for that individual person. But they don't do this because they want to give that person money. They do it because they have to pull them over, and that's how they climb the rankings. So with
That's
that, I see LSATs as a huge leverage point in terms of going to school for free. I had a girl last year, I think she was at a 160 and on the wait list at UF in Florida. And then she got a 164, which bumped her to like 2 points over median. And they immediately offered her a full ride. And this is with the June LSAT. This is not and I should caveat this. This is not a like advertisement for taking the June LSAT. As someone who has worked with thousands of people, this is the only example ever that I can point to where this has worked out. So it
Thank
is,
you. We hate the June
yeah.
Elsa here at
Yeah, I
Grad.
was like, we just talked about how much we hated it. So
Hashtag Team August.
yeah,
Yeah, so I don't mind June as an early bird thing. Like if you're
right.
looking ahead, but
Yes.
yeah, I can't believe people are still applying for this cycle. It blows my mind every time I hear it. But then you talk to them, it's like, are you like, have you researched anything? Like
Yeah,
admission?
we're closed. We're
Yeah.
not doing any more than that cycle.
Yeah. So anyways, the long story short is that LSAT points are probably for many of you the highest leverage income. Well, not it's not income, but it is money that you would be paying. Like this is a activity where you can legitimately make $1,000 an hour in terms of tuition saved. So for you to take it
Yes.
not seriously is honestly crazy. I know people do because it doesn't feel like real money when you're putting it on debt, but you all will pay it back one day. Well, I guess theoretically there could be student loan stuff, but I would not count on that. It is a gamble to expect it. You should take the LSAT seriously. It is somewhat biased, of course, because I am LSAT prep person who makes money off the LSAT, but like our goal is for you to save 100x what you pay us.
You're
So
also going to make money off the LSAT if you get that
Yeah.
LSAT score up. And here's the interesting thing. So Lisanne and I worked with a data, like one of the smartest statisticians that I've ever known. I'll tell you who it is later. I think you know exactly who I'm
I
talking
know
about.
it is.
But he helped law schools break down the index score that US News uses. And then like as it changes, schools kind of change and there's a spreadsheet. Anyway, GPA is actually at the time when we were looking at this data, it actually is a bigger part of the equation than LSAT, but it's 4 years worth of an equation, and it's really hard to change to change a GPA. Whereas 2 to 3 months of study can make a drastic difference in your LSAT score.
yeah, that's a really good point. I always tell people, especially when I get contacted by like freshmen or sophomores in college, that if they're not getting a 4.0, they shouldn't be talking to me. Good forward.
Mhm.
Like your cumulative 4.0 is like if you mess up your freshman year and now you're getting a 4.0, you're fine. You can add on LSAT. But if you're getting a 3.2 or even a 3.7, like put your extra energy towards your grades. Those are forever. Those are never going away. And your LSAT, once you graduate, you can get it done over the summer. Many people will end up taking a gap year. And not that you have to take a gap year. I imagine you have a lot of listeners and clients that are intending to go straight through. But you also, that's a privilege, people. You have to set that up for yourselves. You can't put these things off and then expect to just be able to go through. Although it goes back to, I'd say one of the things where I get not upset, but saddened by this space is that a lot of people do go straight through. And it's someone who maybe is a smart kid and can get to 155 with a like decent amount of effort and they have a decent GPS so they can go to law school. But had they taken a year, they could have gotten to 170 and gone to like, or at least been competitive at truly any school in the country. But because they have to go this year, they put themselves $200,000 in debt to attend a school that will have substantially weaker employment outcomes. So I would just
Right.
take it all seriously, everyone. Like it is self-interested. I'll acknowledge that this is money making for me. I do well when people else have prep, but it's also good advice. Like I do genuinely believe this, and you all should take it very seriously if you are on this path.
That's exactly right. You know, part of our services include scholarship negotiation. And the people are like, well, can I negotiate this? And I'm like, well, you have to have a leg to stand on first. And so we kind of call it internally a vanity retake, right? You're already in, but like, let's do some study and try to get that score up to try to go back like your UF story. And when someone improves their LSAT, it's ten to $20,000 increase per year in their offer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I see it all the time where, and people have an aversion to the LSAT, which I get. I think it's somewhat more of a monster under the bed than it truly is. I can't tell you how many people I talk to who think they're bad test takers and then realize that that's not what the issue is. And it's often the self-limiting belief, which isn't to say that it's not real, because if it's there, it's real. But the, I guess, reasoning for it is often like you struggle with like the SAT or ACT, but that's not always like, it's not. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I haven't actually experienced someone who can't do the LSAT because it is terribly difficult for them, who can't get through it. It's one of those things where I truly believe everyone can get to like the high 150s at a minimum with the caveat of a proper timeline and giving it proper effort. And then many people can go higher. Like I would say like most people can score in the high 160s, which sounds crazy because that's like the 95th percentile, but it is most people. Most people just do not take this test seriously and do not prep for it properly. And part of this is now we have a website with data so I can see who actually does the studying versus who doesn't. And it's been both really encouraging and really discouraging. The encouraging part is that if you do the work, you just get like a 165. It's just a guarantee. The downside is that so few people do the work. So I've really come to the point of low LSAT scores are largely the product of weak preparation and just not putting in the effort and time, which can often feel negative when you're someone who has a lower LSAT score because it can feel like a personal attack. But
Right.
it's, I'd say just, and for what's worth, it can be due to bad prep. Like if you get the prep that's telling you have to memorize a million different LSAT tricks, I'll see stuff from I'll get questions like, hey, I don't know what converse statements are. And I'm like, I don't either. Like that's not real. Like, what are you talking about? Yet people will have all this in their head and it makes it so much harder because now you're thinking it's like some thesis on physics or formal logic. And it's like, it's really not. They told you an
No.
argument. I mean, there's arguments that'll be like, my friend John drives a red sports car. He learned that if you drive a minivan, there's lower crashes. Therefore, if he switches, he'll crash less. And it's like, no, John is crashing because he's a terrible driver, not because he's in a sports car. Like, duh. And that is most of the LSAT, but they put it in really dense language. They'll put it in like it's like a maroon colored automobile, and people just get lost in the words, where the ideas behind them are really simple. You just have to learn that you can do it and learn to struggle with it. And most people just never learn to struggle with it. They just throw in the white flag and say like I'm not gonna try, which I guess I should clarify. I'm not trying to say that's what people have necessarily done, but there's a version of that that largely happens, and it's I don't think people perceive that that's what's happening, but as someone who's now taught it for years and really been able to see it evolve and talk to thousands of people, it is almost universally that is just a either not a good enough timeline, overcomplicating it, or just not putting in the proper effort.
Well, I want to talk about the C word really quick. Not that one. Get your mind out of the gutter. Okay. Logan and I worked at a med school together, and there was this sort of bottleneck with people going to med school for a little while because they couldn't get shadowing hours because, like, your partner couldn't even go into labor and delivery with you because of COVID restrictions, right? And so it really did impact med school applications because people couldn't get the requisite shadowing and clinical hours. And so then we saw a little bit of a blip, where people were like going to med school, there was kind of a backlog, and now it's steadied back out to lowering because of the way healthcare folks are treated, right? We saw kind of the worst way that people can be treated in the medical space, and it really scared a lot of people away from medicine. So they're kind of calibrating in that space. But one thing that we really noticed, you and I, Ben, have talked about when I was on your podcast. Hey Future Lawyer has a podcast too. You should pop over there. It's lots of fun. Um, about the academic regression that we've seen or atrophy that we've seen in this reading comprehension space of these COVID kids that really have academic gaps. We're seeing it in, graduating seniors. We are seeing academic remediation having to happen at the law school and med school level. Um, Logan, I wondered if we could chat a little bit about the social emotional atrophy that we have seen from COVID when it comes to school and how that plays out too in just preparation for interviewing for the LSAT is the academic piece of it, but then there's also this atrophy that we've experienced and we see it at all levels.
Sure. Yeah. I was taking notes as you all were talking. I know what I know about law school is that in the year 2008, I had a brief thought that maybe I wanted to go to law school. And so I bought an LSAT prep book and I got about 15 pages in and was like, oh, this is not for me. And so I closed the LSAT book and I went and got a master's in counseling. So that was my journey with law. I also briefly dated a law student and
RIP.
that was enough right there. And that's all I had. That's all I needed. That's all I needed. And then I was out. Um, but I was kind of taking notes as you all were talking, and in my mind, just comparing MCAT and USMLE and some of those kind of med-sided components. And it really feels like for both, the standardized exam is basically like a canary in a coal mine, right?
Mm.
If that's not going well for you, the rest of the journey is probably going to be a struggle. And I was thinking back to some research we did while I was working at the med school, and we saw a trend that the students, so we kind of took students who did not pass the USMLE on the first attempt, and we looked back at their information and compared it to everyone else, and we were seeing a trend that um, the students who did the best, had a high interview score and a low MCAT score, were more likely to have to remediate USMLE 1.
Mm.
and take it again, which is interesting. But the other thing too, like in the on the med student side, I worked at the undergraduate level too, and I would have students who wanted to go to law school and say that they don't like science. And it was like, abort, abort. If you don't like science, you have no business doing this. And I would assume that maybe that's kind of the same with reading. It sounds like that reading comprehension is such an incredibly important part of both the LSAT and then being successful in law school because you're reading so much, right?
Right. That's
And
right. You're
when
saying the people who said they didn't like science wanted to go to law school or wanted to go to med school?
med school,
Oh, okay. So I don't like science, but I'm gonna go to, yeah, that doesn't make sense. So yes, reading comprehension and this like, because that's a gripe, right? Ben, that we hear a lot of times. The LSAT has nothing to do with law school. Why do we have to take this test, right? Trump's gonna do away with the LSAT, so I don't have to worry about this. Lysanne, remember that mom that
Mhm.
hopped on with us? She was like, well, now that the LSAT's going away.
I
Yeah.
forgot about that. Blocked that out. Yeah, like we were saying, does it have law topics on it? No, but it's testing the skills that are going to carry over to law school and the bar exam and when you're reading cases and researching for your own cases one day. I mean, it's very, very important.
Mhm.
So can we chat quickly about the holistic view?
Yeah.
So I know, and we were talking about this before the recording, but a lot of schools say that they take a holistic view at students' applications. Um, and I think there's some truth to that. You know, if you show up and or you ghost them, you don't come in for an interview, you don't respond to any of the emails, your resume is terribly written, your personal statement, like Ben said, sounds like a psycho. You know, things like that are gonna definitely pop up as some red flags on your application. But do law schools really take a holistic view, Ben?
Yeah, I'd say so. The thing that I think I push back against is the idea that I think when people hear holistic, they make inferences that are not there. It's actually something you get punished on LSAT, which is when you infer from something. Like if I say, if you go to bed on time, you'll get to watch TV tomorrow. People often infer that if you don't go to bed on time, you won't get to watch TV, when in reality, that was never said. We only talked about the positive scenario where you do go to bed. And I'd say people also, so like that is an inference that we as humans often make because that's how we converse with each other. Yet
Yeah.
that's not how the LSAT works, and that's technically not how things are. So I find people in this space will often, and I'm not referring to you all, of course, you all are put out great information, but people will often say it's holistic and kind of leave the inference there as to like your numbers are really not that substantial or there's a lot more to it. And there is. Not to go back to the LSAT once again, but I would argue that your numbers are usually a necessary but not sufficient tool to get in. So like you have to have the numbers to at least be competitive. Now, whether that's a 150 out of school or a 170 out of school, depending on where it is completely different. But if you show up with a 135, no one is going to give you half a glance. So but though it is true, like say you have a 175 4.0, but you have clearly like written terribly in your essays or you're rude with the admissions office, that is certainly going to keep you out. So you can sink the ship. And in fact, I had someone who did LSAT with this year. We didn't do any admission stuff, but they kept me posted, as people often do. That's most of my experience with admissions is people just like they get to know me, so they kind of update me. And he was I believe 173.39, so like pretty good numbers. Not perfect, but pretty close to perfection on both aspects. And he struck out. And knowing the kid, I know why. It's because he comes off as a jerk. And it's like you're keeping yourself out. The admissions offices are picking up on this. They're like, we don't want you in our building for the next 3 years. You're going to be a problem, and we're going to have to deal with you. He actually did just get into a school off the wait list, who I think is trying to shore up their medians because they're like, I guess we'll pick our nose, and
Cool with it.
he got in. But like
You
really,
know what happens in those situations, Ben? The people who reviewed the application, a lot of times it will go to a faculty committee. At that point, if they're like an in-betweener or you're like, oh, do we want this person? They'll say, you can admit him, but do not put him in my section.
Yeah,
You don't want to be that kid.
so true.
I do think that you also have to remember too, like again, across all spaces, residency, med school, law school, the way you speak to staff has a significant impact in how this unfolds for you. You know, I know in the residency space, like how you speak to the residency coordinator determines whether or not you have any shot at
Yeah.
becoming a resident at that program. I'd imagine it's the same in the law space as well.
I actually have an admissions question for Autumn and Lysanne because it's one I'm getting a lot right now, and it's one that I've always had an answer to it, but it's not an answer actually backed by experience. So I'm curious to hear like what the actual experienced people say. But right now, I have a lot of people who are either on wait lists or just have not even been rendered a decision, which I will say is a bad sign. If they haven't told you by May, they're probably not.
What is Stanford doing?
Yeah.
Um, but so if you, so let's say I'm a hypothetical person, I submit my apps, no one's responding. Does it help me to like email the admissions office and say, hey, just so you know, I applied? I mean, obviously phrase better, but does that follow up of I applied, where's my decision, do anything? Or is that, I mean, my, I guess, initial thought was that it would be negative. It's like if they wanted you, they already would have responded. But from your guys' take, what would you say to a situation like that?
So if it's a school they really want to go to, they should have already visited and they should already know what the admissions officers look like. You should be on a first name basis with them. You should have toured before you applied and after you applied. Like if I had my pick, if you have a top three law school, you should have already been physically there. And that kind of email, if it's transactional, it's just like I'm just checking in on my stuff. Just check your LSAT tracker, like your LSAT tracker. That's all you need to do. If you have if you have a way to continue kind of conveying that interest and it's real and it's not transactional and you have an update, like I have a client who has a 4.0 and he's in all of his top schools, but there's like one school he's waiting to hear from. And he was able to graduate and maintain that 4.0. So we wrote a letter of continued interest to the school and we're able to say that and like up like, hey, not only did I have a 4.0 when I applied, it's still there. Like, can we just go? And it was a really well written letter. It was not long. It had bullet points and it was, maybe one paragraph. So I think succinct, but yeah, honestly, Ben, like when we get to this point in the cycle, we're really trying to protect our yield. And so if you've been following up, not to like a crazy, you don't want to stay on the people, but like give them significant updates, let them know you're still interested. And here are some magic words. I'm going to give you some magic words. I'm ready to withdraw my other applications if you admit me. That's the magic words. I'm like, great, this person's ready to go. I'm going to give you an exploding offer. Commit, I'll get and pay your seat deposit today and let's go.
Absolutely. But it's all about the relationship up to this point. So
Right.
if I'm an admissions professional and I have never even heard a word from this person, then they shoot me an email that says, hey, where's my decision? I'm not responding to you. First of all, it's not just that one little sentence. I'm like, no, you haven't responded to coming in for a tour. You haven't, come at least called and expressed interest.
Attend a
So
virtual event, like
yeah,
you've got to make, especially in this kind
yeah,
of an admission cycle.
absolutely. And so
What
it really just, again, it depends. It depends
do
on
you
what
think
that
about?
communication needs to look like now. It's contingent upon how have you been working with that school since September.
That's right. What do you think about that? Is that
It,
strange?
it's interesting. I guess I always, well, I think part of it is that I am pretty averse to people ever going to a school that they're getting in off the wait list because my take on it is you're going to be paying full price. And I guess theoretically, if you're getting in on like off of Stanford's wait list, I can swallow that because everyone's paying full price at Stanford. But often it's like if you're getting in off the like Utah wait list, not to go back to earlier, it's like, well, you're going to a school where you're going to be paying full price. You're probably academically not, I guess theoretically, maybe you off put the admissions office and you are coming in ready to compete in terms of your LSAT and GPA, which while not entirely predictive, do indicate how ready you are. And had you been one of the top applicants, you probably just would have gotten in the front door as opposed to backdooring yourself in. So
Right.
I basically tell people, I mean, my take on it is like never go to a school off the wait list. It means you're not ready for that school typically. If although I guess maybe if you're like our friend earlier who 173 3.9 got into one T14 off the wait list, I don't worry about that person academically. I have other concerns for them, but like I'd say largely, yeah, it makes sense from the perspective of the schools. I guess I am always viewing it from perhaps a different perspective than you all are used to. And that's just, I don't know, I have a very different approach, which is very focused on does the school make sense? So
Yeah.
it's really that
I
wait list
I
thing.
think that's wise. I think that's
Absolutely.
absolutely wise. It was always interesting. We would go to LSAC's annual meeting, which is happening here in like a week, and we're not going. But when we would go there, we'd sit around the table, and there would always be like one or two people who we would have in common with other schools. And we're like, oh my gosh, wasn't he lovely? Or wasn't she a nightmare? Or whatever. And it was because they had, visited and like had these times. And we would be like, I can't believe they picked you. I'm so sad. I'm so sad that they picked you over this. And those are the people I feel like, who ended up coming in and they did the ones who we talked positively about, but it's networking. And
Yeah.
you networking with the admission staff at these schools is kind of your first foray into building your legal network. And, in a lot of these offices, the admissions office and career services work really closely together. They work hand in hand with faculty. And so if I know of a faculty member who's like looking for a graduate assistant or who's looking for, a golf buddy, and I've gotten to know you, then I can connect you. It's about building those connections. And that doesn't happen through a transactional checking in email. It happens by building an authentic relationship when you're not asking for something, so that when you do need to ask for something, you already have that scaffold built.
Absolutely. And visiting and having, starting that relationship early. It's not just to put the finesse on your application. It's also for your benefit too, because you could end up going to this great school that you absolutely hate because the students aren't nice to each other or they're really
Or it's a
lax.
cinder block, right? It's a
Right.
cinder block basement, which you're going to be spending your whole first
Yeah,
year in. And you don't know that from the pictures because it's like a catfish. Logan and I had
absolutely.
some stories about catfishes in schools, don't we,
We
Logan?
absolutely do. And that's a big part of what we do is, we're not just with students once they get admitted to their school, we're with them through their school decision. And it's a really big decision. Even if you're going somewhere full ride, everything paid. If you hate it, that's still 3 years of your life that you're paying, for even if you're going to a school for free. So it's a really big decision. Again, trying to reach out to the students who are like me, who are just checking the boxes. It's like, no, really think hard about what that's going to look like for you in terms of your academics, in terms of the legal network that you're building, in terms of the relationships that you're going to build, your mental health, all of those things. And so
Yeah.
going to visit is just really important. And so I'm with Ben. If you've I never even, talked to that school or, you're getting off the wait list this late, I would really think through that.
Yeah. Ben, how can people find you? Where can they follow you? And what do you think is a good way for them to connect?
Yeah, so anyone can always email us. I'm Ben at Hey Future Lawyer. We also have our support team for more like product inquiries at support at Hey Future Lawyer. We're at socials everywhere, Hey Future Lawyer. I have a podcast, so if you're a podcast person, which I imagine you wouldn't be here by now if you weren't, I have one. It's a little different. It's just kind of me going through and honestly yelling at applicants basically for all the decisions they make. But you can get a lot of, it's meant to be instructive in terms of like they make their mistakes and I yell at them so you don't have to, and hopefully you can learn. I also read through essays and whatnot on there just to kind of yell at people. I'm sure, a lot of similar advice to what you all would give. Probably delivered a little bit. I get pretty mean on the podcast, but that's kind of the bit is like if you email in with a question and you have a stupid idea about making $500,000 out of like Southwestern Law School working as Kim Kardashian's lawyer, I'm going to tell you how delusional you are because like that's not a thing. And also, I talk to those people probably every day. So like I get a little exasperated and occasionally I'll be very so anyways, it's a lot of me filibustering for a very simple question, so I apologize. But basically, Hey Future Lawyer everywhere. We're biggest on Instagram, but we're also present on other places, just not nearly as much. So the podcast and Instagram are the big ones. Our website has a full free LSAT course, so you can actually
It's
try it before you buy it.
incredible.
So yeah, I would start there. If you are an LSAT prepper, it's about 7 to 8 hours of just like everything you do. It is like for all my, I'd say maybe you guys will have to like edit me, but I think I was pretty on good behavior today.
We're
I'm
so good. Yeah.
on as good of behavior on my like Instagram or on the course or that. But for some people, I think they like it. If it's not for you, that's chill. But I think it makes LSAT prep more fun for the
Yes.
majority of people. So yeah, check.
That's what my clients say. They're like, I look forward to going to LSAT prep when I do Hey Future Lawyer instead of dreading it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you all having me. It's always fun to talk about these things. I could talk about it all day. Just there's so many like little nuanced, fascinating things about admissions, and you all have such a perspective that I just haven't gotten to explore because I've always called admissions officers like used car salesmen, where they're trying to sell you on their school. But you all are now on.
That's true for some of them.
Yeah. And it's not that they're bad, it's just incentives. Like show me the incentives, I'll show you the result. Their incentive is to get people to come to their school and pay them as much money as possible. But applicants, I think, often think they're friends. And not to say that they're bad people, but it's like we have to consider what their job is here. And their job is not to get you to go to the best school for cheaps. Their job is to get you to go to their school for the most money, which is where people like you are so helpful in this process because people just don't understand the law school process. And like it's funny for all that we said about the LSAT being important, you all should not like discount the admission stuff because it is truly important. And having someone like Autumn and Lysanne in your corner, or Logan from med school, not that I know anything about that, but it's so useful. Like you all, the differences are truly night and day. And in this, like this is your career. This is the next 40, 50 years of your life. You want to start it on the right path. So you all should really consider meeting with Autumn, talking to her, seeing how she can help you. It'll make a huge difference. And I fully endorse it as someone who is honestly a little anti-admissions consulting when I started. And then you see it, and then you're like, okay, they actually are providing a really real service that needs to be out there. So if you're skeptical, I'd at least just talk to her and see if it fits.
Thanks so much for joining us, Ben. It was so good to have you. We're going to have you back. I think maybe getting a little closer to when apps open. That'd be a really good time to have you back and talk more about what you're seeing, LSAT trends. We don't know what's going to happen. This cycle was insane. It's, very competitive. What is it, 19.5% increase. It's been fluctuating just a little bit here as we've tallied up the final numbers, but there's no indication that next cycle is going to be any less competitive. So get ready to do your work. And we're going to turn off the lights here in the pod loft, but we always have things rolling on socials. So we'll see you there.